You guys doing? Good afternoon. We don't have a whole lot of time. This is more of a keynote ramble because I'm probably going to be going really fast through some of these slides because there's quite a bit to cover. I'm attempting to go through effectively 20-some histories of internet disruption of the media world in about 10 minutes and then submitting a challenge for the group of folks here. I do really appreciate being here, so thank you so much for the invite, Natasha and the FCC team. So let's jump right into it. So what I'm going to do today is submit to you one thesis, one recommendation, and then eventually one challenge as well. And by the way, I won't be talking too much about the South China Morning Post and all of this, mostly because we are still in the process of trying to understand the marketplace that we're playing in right now, just like many of you. And we are trying to figure out what our transformation is really going to look like over the next few years. And so hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll have a lot more to be able to tell you. But this will hopefully give you a glimpse at the way that we are critically thinking about the marketplace and about our own transformation as a news organization. So let's go ahead and start with the thesis. The thesis I will submit is that if we look at the last 2 decades of the internet, and specifically the way that the internet has disrupted our industry, we can categorize or segment out those 20 years in a couple of different platform eras. Those platform eras being distinguished by how users' discovery and consumption behavior has changed. Okay, our readers and our users, their behavior of how they find news or content and how they consume it has changed. And there's, in my opinion, 3 distinct eras that we have walked through and a 4th that we are on the cusp of. The first one, if we look at the very, very start of this disruption, first internet website was in 1991. By 1995, we had a couple of thousand websites. And at that point in time, from then until about 2003, when broadband really started penetrating in high volumes across developed countries, most of the time, our experience with the internet was based on the entry point, either an ISP, AOL in the United States at one point at 85%, captured 85% of everyone that was dialing up into the internet, or the default homepage that your browser would open on. And here in Asia, that was for most of us, Yahoo. And so these 2 brands and a couple of these other portals, they determined the way that we viewed the internet. They curated for us the sites and the news and the content that we could consume on this relatively new World Wide Web. The volume of sites, for us, it might have felt like there was an ocean of content, but it really was, compared to what we have today, I mean, just a little tiny drop. Tiny, tiny drop compared to what we have today. And so this is the portal era. Portals define how we discovered and consumed content. Then, of course, this happened. Inflection point starting around 2003, 2004, with the introduction of new kinds of publishing platforms that allowed practically anyone to create a website. Okay, we can, in the future, decide whether or not this was a watershed moment for good in human history or a watershed moment for bad. We still haven't quite made up our minds yet. The reality is that suddenly everyone who had an opinion could publish that opinion easily. It used to be you had to know how to code. You had to be an engineer, and you had to have access to engineering equipment, literally server boxes that you could put underneath your desk from where you can serve a website. I don't know how many of you guys still remember or have had the experience of coding your own website, but you having to actually serve it locally from your own computer tower. That's how it used to be done, not that long ago. But with the introduction of these ready-made, what you see is what you get publishing platforms, everyone was able to start publishing. These were also tools that allowed real newspapers, publishers, to be able to get online when they hadn't been experimenting with it before, and website usage, or the number of websites, exploded. When Yahoo was founded, there were 3,000 websites online. When Google was founded, it was 3 million. When Baidu was founded by 2000, there was 17 million. By the time I'm talking about now, 2003, 2004-ish, there are over 50 million. Today, we have stabilized a little bit over the course of the last 2 years at about 1.2 billion active websites on the internet. And that's not counting the amount of content that is being uploaded to those websites. which now we're counting in zettabytes. Right? So we know on a daily basis the amount of content that is being created, whether it's user-generated content or professionally generated content that is uploaded on the internet, on a daily basis now, exceeds the amount of data that was actually created by the entire human race, a number of bytes, between the start of recorded human history all the way through 2010. Every single day, we now upload and create more content counted in bytes than all that rest of human history. That's the amount of content that we have today. So starting around 2003, we needed a different way of organizing what we now know as the open web. Of course, at this point, Google was already 4 or 5 years old. They were about a year away from IPO in 2004. Yet PageRank at this point in 2003 became important for us as news publishers for the first time. We started to understand that PageRank was a lifeline for us. Those of us who were experimenting on the internet at that point, our traffic was going up and down based on how our PageRank was, no longer how the portals were curating us on their front page. Not only was search important, there was also a second dynamic, which I'm not representing as a logo here, because it would have felt like me being a homer, because it was the company that I was a part of right before the South China Morning Post, and it was Dig. So Dig, along with a couple of other companies, but Dig was the primary one, their innovation around 2004, 2005 was wisdom of the crowds as an organizational principle for online content. Now today, that's a fancy term, wisdom of the crowds as an organizational concept. What that means is the upvote or the like, right? That was started around 04, 05. And that was the first time where there were portals made specifically to say users can submit the things that they think are interesting, and a group of people would upvote, and then we will create effectively a alternative to a newspaper front page based on a bunch of people deciding what is interesting or what is good. So that's how we organized the open web for about 7 years. And then, of course, this happened. 2007 came along and the iPhone was launched. You've all seen multiple versions of this slide. It doesn't matter which version we take a look at, whether it's cut up by number of devices, or cut up by traffic, or cut up by region, it all looks exactly the same. Exponential growth in smartphone adoption. Exponential growth in traffic across the mobile internet since the launch of the smartphone, since the launch of the iPhone in 2007. 10-year anniversary this year. Now what that led to was, of course, a third distinct platform era, the mobile era. The reason why this is distinct, and the reason why this disrupted the news industry so much, has actually nothing to do with the size of the screen, which for a number of years was what we were claiming as a news industry. That it changed our behavior because the screen was smaller. No, that's not why. It's because the runtime changed. Suddenly, people were moving from desktop, where their internet activity was effectively opening up a browser, which in effect was a portal that they could go anywhere they wanted on the internet. No restriction, right? So if you got them to remember your URL very, very easily with very little inhibition, they would be able to get to your site and your content. If you were able to SEO well enough on Google, you would have access based on keywords to get into their consumption behavior. But with mobile and smartphones came an app ecosystem that we were slow to adjust to. Of course, when the apps first came out, the reality was that everyone started rushing from developing an HTML to native apps. None of us, this is when we started hating the word native. Now we hate it because of native ads. But back then we hated it because of native apps. We didn't know what it was, but everyone rushed to it, so we started investing massively in native apps. If you actually go back and look at a lot of our websites, major news publications around the world, there was about a 5-year period where mobile web, or web in general, did not advance at all. We missed an opportunity there, by the way, in retrospect. But we stopped focusing and investing on the web. We went straight to apps. And certainly, when apps first came out, there was a spike in just the amount of apps that people downloaded and used, but then immediately dropped off. In fact, leading apps analytics companies all around the world are estimating that over the course of the last 3 years, the number of apps that users use every single day has halved. So it turns out that the app ecosystem actually closed the internet in a way that we would never have imagined. People are now going to less sources because they believe those less sources, those fewer number of sources, will give them the view of the world that they need. right now, Facebook is a leader in all of that. Facebook's growth, if you superimpose it on mobile growth, is exactly the same. Follows hand in hand. This is not coincidence of timing. One thing that we underappreciate, sometimes forget, totally forget, is that the killer feature for Facebook that made Facebook so different than the other social networks that existed at the time, than any of the other networks that we had access to when it comes to publishing or sharing, was photos. The Facebook newsfeed and the initiation of tagging on Facebook made Facebook for the first time the easiest way, the one easy way, to be able to take a photo and share it with friends. Share it with people you cared about. So now we can take, store, and share photos in a couple of clicks. Before, it was take a photo with a DSLR, connect that cord to your computer, wait 45 minutes for it to get to your computer, and then put it hopefully on Picasa, and depending on your internet upload connection, it would take a couple of hours. And then if you wanted to send a photo, you had to choose the files you wanted, put them into a zip file, and then email it to a friend. And then Facebook came along with the newsfeed and tagging, and suddenly it became dead simple. And of course, the value of that was exponentially realized when we started carrying high-quality cameras in our pockets every single day, everywhere we went. So this connection between the rise of social networks, specifically Facebook, and mobile is certainly not coincidence. Of course, now, with social media as the primary discovery and consumption channel for news, and by the way, I hope that everyone here realizes what scale we're talking about now. We're talking about 46% of, according to Reuters, 46% of US adults now consume news primarily on Facebook. Pew Research expects that over the course of the next 3 years, that will grow to about 62%. Facebook itself, American millennials are now consuming about 35% of all of their content every single day just through the Facebook network. So this death of Facebook with the millennial or Gen Z generation, I think, is a little bit exaggerated. The homepage for us, because of that, as news organizations, has certainly died. Parsley, which is an analytics tool for online publishers, surveyed about 600 top publishers that work with their platform. And over 50% of those publishers now see less than 10% of internal traffic from their homepage, article traffic from their homepage. Less than 10% of article traffic is now referred from their homepage. And on average, at this point, across major publishers, less than 30% of your traffic is direct. There are a couple of outliers, certainly. But across the industry, on average, if you're able to get past 30% as direct traffic, you celebrate. You crack a bottle of champagne. Which is why I always find it weird still, or especially now, that when I talk to news organizations and they show me new versions of their app and they're going through demos, they start on the homepage when they show me the user experience. And by the way, we do the same thing at South China Morning Post. Our product team has, I piss them off a lot because every time they show me an app with the homepage, I stop the meeting and ask them to go redraw. Because that's not where we start. That is not the start of most of the user experience that comes to our news sites anymore, or news products. So when 2014 came around and the innovation report from the New York Times was leaked, and A.G. Salzberger and his team said that the homepage was dead, he certainly, and that team certainly, was not exaggerating. Beholden to social media has not been a good situation for us. Every single time Facebook changes their algorithm, our traffic is very, very volatile. We complain about it. We get together and we wonder what the solution is, and we're not sure that we can find one. Here's the thing. Even though Facebook is the largest of these, and probably largest because it is the easiest for both consumer and publisher and us, the largest distribution network for news at this point in the world, we do still have choice. Consumers, even though they have chosen only a few apps that they go to every single day, still there is enough fragmentation in this ecosystem that we can either decide that, oh my gosh, there's too many things I have to think about, therefore it's debilitating, and reject this fragmentation. Or we can see it as an unbelievable opportunity. So here's a recommendation that I want to submit to this group. As we continue to mature in the world that we live in, when it comes to digital media distribution, we have to think about two different types of platforms that we're working with: a discovery platform and a consumption platform. It is very important that you understand those are two different things. Discovery platform, where our readers and users find our content: Facebook, Twitter, Google search, maybe your own homepage if you're lucky. And the consumption platform, where they actually read, watch, listen to that content. Those are different. And in fact, there's an entire matrix of permutation between those two. And every single one of those permutations requires a different expression of news. Because very often you're addressing a different demographic, a different consumption preference, consumption behavior. So it's no longer a world where our product, our output as a news organization is just the world's best, most accurate narrative on what's going on in the world. That content has to be the right content with the right packaging for the right platform permutation. I know that doesn't roll off the tongue. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of anything better than this. But it really is. It is that news, that best content. We create news the way we always have. We report the way we always have. We still care about independence and integrity the way we always have. But once that raw copy has been filed, the way we think about our output and our product has to be that content with the right packaging for the right platform permutation. Not just the right discovery platform, but the right discovery platform leading to the right consumption platform. Take Facebook as an example of a discovery platform. Your content could look completely different on Facebook depending on where your user wants to consume. The reader now knows that little lightning bolt. They know whether or not they want to click on an instant article piece. So the representation and expression of your written piece is going to look different on IA than if they were to click on an article that forwards to a mobile website and within their container, but still it's a mobile HTML site. And of course, on the same discovery platform, you're going to have short-form video or Facebook Live. It could be the same journalism, the same story, even the same words, but represented through the same discovery platform in completely different ways. This can feel debilitating because there's so much choice for us as a publisher. But it really is. We really should be looking at this as a golden age of opportunity for news because it gives us the channels of storytelling that have never been available to us before, not to mention the kind of reach that in human history has not been available. These are two massive opportunities we can run away from, or we can decide, you know what, we're going to change the way that the organization is run. We're going to change the way that our products are built, the way that we ideate and think about the news product to take advantage of this opportunity. Now, of course, not owning distribution and the confusion of fragmentation is not the only ill that comes from the landscape that we live in right now. Our brands have been atomized, that is for sure. In the United States, 50% of adults who consume news on the internet say that they don't actually look at the publisher name anymore, the publisher brand. In other countries, English-speaking countries, UK, Australia, Canada, it's even higher than that, 60+%. So our brands are certainly at risk. We often, as a news industry now, point to this and point to the networks because they're not giving us canvases that allow our brand to really shine through. Point to this and say this is one of those reasons why fake news is so dangerous, why it exists. And we've been pointing a lot of fingers around the fake news issue. Been pointing fingers at the networks saying they have an accountability, pointing fingers at advertising saying, hey, you need to come up with a better mechanic so that we're not funding fake news or creating the wrong incentives, misaligning incentives. We're pointing fingers at the news sites, where ostensibly news sites are really peddling in falsehoods, pointing at administrations and governments and presidents who are trading in alternative facts as well. But the atomization of the brand is actually also partnered with an atomization of the broadsheet that is our accountability. So here's the challenge I would submit, is that if we are thinking about fake news, and by the way, all that finger pointing, none of that is wrong. All of those parties have accountability in this. But we do as well as a news industry. When I'm talking about the atomization of the broadsheet, I mean that we have not figured out a way to take the structure of our newspaper that has created the context of what news is and translated it to the limited, understandably limited, but the canvas that is available to us in digital media. So I would argue that today, most people who consume news on social media could not tell you the difference between what is front page news versus what is commentary versus what is an editorial. Evan Osnos mentioned this earlier this morning, that we have confused the news industry with the commentary industry, with the opinion industry. And I do believe that as a news industry, we have an accountability there. This was the front page of the Huffington Post yesterday. And honestly, I could have picked any day. And I'm not calling out the Huffington Post because everyone does this. This was their front page splash story. If you click into it, it's hard for me as an industry insider to figure out whether or not this is an opinion piece or a news piece. Same with BuzzFeed. This was their front page splash of all the lies of Donald Trump in the first 100 days. Gosh, I really hope it's not 100 years. Yeah, he lied a lot, but is this, in listing out the lies, which are facts, is this an opinion piece or a news piece? The line is super fuzzy at this point. And it's not just new digital media companies that are doing this. Traditional newspapers, again, understanding limited canvas, but within the limited canvas, we have not been accountable either. We have to understand that on social media, the world we live in, the way we distribute, everything looks the same. This video on the left-hand side from The Guardian is an opinion piece. This article on the right-hand side from the New York Times is an opinion piece. Even when it's the same publisher, we're not consistent. Here, 2 opinion pieces from the Washington Post. On the right-hand side, the opinion section of the Washington Post is cited. On the left-hand side is not. And by the way, the South China Morning Post should not be the newspaper that is casting stones. Because we are doing this constantly. God, Jared, how many times have you been pissed with me calling this out for us? A lot, huh? This is how much, this is what I text the editorial team all the time. Is when I see this and I say, okay, these are 2 opinion pieces. On the left-hand side, we don't call an opinion. On the right-hand side, we do. Why are we inconsistent? I know that Facebook is not giving us a lot of leeway to make this differentiation, but we have an accountability towards media literacy and raising the level of media literacy in the world, and we should pay attention to this. Are we having this conversation with Facebook? Probably not. I know that most of the conversation we're having with these networks is, how do you call out fake news? What about giving us an option for us to be able to share opinion and editorial side by side with the news and the facts that give it context, that make it actually valuable, that allow a reader to intelligently understand what the truth is, what other people's opinions are, and then make up their own damn mind? I think we as news organizations have to understand this is our accountability, because if we don't take it up, no one else is going to. And I have argued with other people in the news industry who have said, oh man, we have to go to schools and primary and high schools and universities need to start teaching media literacy. I think we're fighting the wrong battle there. We have an opportunity to own this. And so the challenge for the people in this room, including our own paper, is to do that. All right, I'm already out of time, but I'm gonna wrap up very, very quickly because I promised that there were 4 different platform areas, or at least I suggested there are 4 platform areas. So let me very quickly talk about the 4th one that I believe we're on the cusp of entering into. And thankfully for me, this room, out of pretty much any room that I've ever talked about this to, is the one who's gonna understand this the most. It's the one I'm gonna have to convince the least, because I'm guessing most of you here report on and in and around China. So what's going on right now in the consumption, discovery, and consumption space is that the age of the app is moving on. Even all of the major native apps that do the best out of all apps are dropping month over month, year over year in downloads. People are going to less and less apps. Where are they going? They're going to Messenger. At the end of 2015, Messenger apps and total MAU passed social media apps, if you didn't know. They are huge apps. And by the way, these numbers are a year old, which in internet terms means that they are completely irrelevant. WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger are well over 1.2 billion monthly active users. WeChat at this point is about 800 million monthly active users, something like that, 770 at least. These are enormous networks in aggregate, not deduped. In aggregate, there are about 3 billion different accounts on messaging around the world at this point. And it's not just about the volume of accounts, the amount of time people are spending in real-time communication versus social media. China's not on this chart. If China were, it would look even more skewed. And the frequency that people use messaging. At this point, about 90% of people visit messaging every single day, more than any other app category. So, what I submit to you is that the cusp that we're moving into around the world, because China's already been there for a couple of years, the cusp that we're moving into is that messaging will become a primary, if not the primary distribution channel, discovery and consumption channel for media. Now, those of you lucky enough to be on WeChat every single day know this. The rest of the world will get this. United States, we're starting to see a massive uptake in media links being shared across WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. While those two platforms, by the way, have not yet built a product or a feature that allows news discovery to be easy, the moment they build that, it is going to shift. Facebook shut down their news apps. They're two different news apps, right? The actual paper app, as well as their Notify app. They're now investing heavily in live video. When the live video thing has been done and they feel like they have penetration, I'm almost certain they go right back to news. We have Google News Lab here. I don't want to make Irene tell us what's going on. I really do want to make Irene tell us what's going on at Google. But I'm sure Google knows exactly what's coming. So I think as a news industry, we missed out on the first two platform eras. We didn't take advantage of it. The third one, we're catching up in, and we're finally starting to learn how to leverage that distribution, that opportunity that has been presented to us, and see it as a positive, hopefully. I really hope that as an industry, we're not going to miss out on this one, and we can get ahead of the game. Whatever it is, I could be completely wrong here. But another platform era is coming. So if I'm wrong about messaging, it's going to be something else. When that something else comes, I certainly hope that we'll be ahead of the game this time. Thank you.
So to be ahead of the game, you need to be able to fund the game, and no one knows how to do that. So how do you do that?
That question I wish I could answer. Monetization, I didn't even touch on because this is I went massively over time, and monetization is a 3-day conversation. You guys saw IAB came out with their US digital advertising numbers just a couple of days ago. And the US digital advertising marketplace grew a lot year over year, 2015 to 2016. Grew about $13 billion, $59 billion to $72 billion. Okay, it's huge. But that 13 billion growth, 49% of it was from Google, 40% of it was from Facebook. So those two companies accounted for 89% of the digital advertising growth. Everyone else got to share the last 10%. We live in a duopoly, which means that we as a news industry have a very, very hard time using digital advertising to fund the gap between what people are willing to pay for news and how much it costs to create real news. The amount of money that goes into investigative journalism is nowhere near enough today because we can't fund it. So I'm not answering your question. I'm just agreeing with you that it's a massive problem. I do think that the solution is a mix of revenue channels. It is no longer going to be one thing. It's not going to be just subscription. It's certainly not going to be just ads. It could be a combination of subscription and ads and intelligence, right, and data and platform. I don't know what that mix is, but it will be a mix. We have had the luxury of a news industry over our history to rely on single revenue channels, whether it was distribution, circulation, or classifieds. Now we actually have to diversify and expect that it's going to be multiple different channels that are brought together, managed across multiple different funnels to be able to fund the kind of news that the world needs.
Hi, I wanted to kind of talk more about the point you raised about people not noticing kind of the brand where the story's from. And it's probably because there are only about 2 or 3 takes on any one story. And once you've read all 3, reading another article on that subject means you want to actually gain more information. From your perspective, kind of looking at the South China Morning Post, I guess what are the unique qualities of the Post that I guess you will try to emphasize to kind of make that look different on these various platforms? To make sure that when people see an SEMP story, they're actually recognizing that this is the thing it's trying to emphasize.
I think you're actually asking 2 very distinctly different questions. The first one is on format, right? On what the product looks like, and that's what I was talking about. I think as a very, very traditional paper that is just at the start of this transformation, and we are late as a paper, I'd admit that, what we need to think about is how do we play in this world of fragmentation? How do we play with all these permutations of distribution plus consumption platform? And I'm hoping that we can think about this product from a user's perspective first, and so the product itself will stand out. Okay, so that's a product thing. I think you're also asking from a narrative point of view or an editorial line point of view. Oh, I see. Okay. That's easy to answer. So where we are unique, and I think most of the folks in this room, I'm preaching to a choir here. We have a unique opportunity being here in Hong Kong to report on China in a different way. And that is absolutely our intent as the South China Morning Post, is that hopefully we believe that we have an intimacy to China to put it within context, the right kind of context, whether it's historical or cultural, on-the-ground context because of intimacy. But at the same time, we have freedom of press protection, okay? And some of you are smiling because of the RSF report from the last couple of days. But the reality is that we have freedom of press protection here in Hong Kong that allows us to actually report in the right way. Those 2 things make Hong Kong unique. And as a paper that is based and born out of Hong Kong, we believe that we have an accountability to leverage that position for reporting on China to the rest of the world. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So our next sessions will start in